Greetings, I'm Dr. Al Freeman, Director of LCMS School Ministry, and I am with Tom Kolb, the Education Executive of the Southeastern District, and Joel Lansgrainer, Executive Director of Mare Lutheran High School in Mare, Minnesota. And we are going to talk today about Genesis Project or Genesis Study and Lutheran School Consulting Services, two programs that we run out of Lutheran School Ministry at the LCMS. And both of you very familiar with Genesis Study as well as LSCS. I know, Tom, you have referenced a lot of congregations to us to begin the Genesis process as well as LSCS visits. And Joel, you have served both as a Genesis Study consultant and an LSCS consultant. So with both programs, Genesis Study is designed to start a Lutheran school. Congregations can engage LCMS School Ministry in the Genesis Study process for a fee of $500. It is a great deal.
Great deal.
And then School Ministry covers the other expenses related to the study process in terms of assigning a consultant, all of the consultant's work and time, as well as travel expenses and meals when they travel there, all the big expenditures in the process. And they engage the congregation in determining in a feasibility study whether or not it is designed to start a Lutheran school. So why don't we tackle Genesis first in that realm? Tom, why talk to a congregation and say, hey, you should engage LCMS School Ministry in the Genesis study process?
Yeah, well, thanks, Al. I would say the first thing for me as the education executive is people in my district, congregations who are interested, or even just groups of concerned Lutheran Christians who have a desire to see Lutheran education be fostered in their area. The natural thing for them to do is to contact me as the education executive. I'm fairly new as an education executive, but I've been in Lutheran education a long time, but I wouldn't necessarily know the best way to start or even study with the feasibility of a Lutheran school. So as the education executive, the person who brings the resource, I'm really grateful to have something like the Genesis study where I know that other Lutheran educators who do have experience in starting Lutheran schools or know the right questions to ask, I have a resource to turn these groups toward and know that'll be done well, economically too. I mean, I joked about the $500, but where are you going to find a consultant who's going to come in with any type of knowledge and give you the breadth that you're going to get through the Genesis program?
Typically, you're looking at thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it might be $500 an hour.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at some of the private studies out there, and there are plenty of for-profit companies that will give you ideas about starting a private school, but you're going to pay through the nose for it. And honestly, they just don't understand what's unique and special about Lutheran schools and Lutheran education. So I think it's only right for LCMS School Ministry to be able to run a program like this, and I think it's very generous of the LCMS and their donors to make it so affordable. We've got a couple groups right now that are interested in schools. Maybe it's going to be a micro school. Maybe it's going to be a classical school. Maybe it's, who knows what it's going to be, but I know Genesis will give them the proper guidance. And let's face it, maybe the answer is not now, or not in this way, or maybe you need to rethink that. I really appreciate Genesis coming alongside of people like me, the education executives, and be able to promote Lutheran schools, but in a meaningful and wise way.
Yeah, and you unpack several items that are very important in the Genesis study. Number one is we work with the district education executive. So if someone engages LCMS School Ministry through an email or online application, the very first thing we do is turn it right around to the education executive, and the education executive must sign off on the Genesis study process. And then along with that, the affordability is incredible, and the consultant that gets assigned has the experience in Lutheran education, probably has started a Lutheran school, and we match it up in terms of the school possibilities. So if you're looking at a classical school, we assign someone that has a classical school background and has started a classical school. If it's a micro school, the same concept. We match up a consultant, traditional school. And then sometimes we get asked, well, we don't really know if we want to be classical or traditional. We might engage two consultants to send out because we help you through that process as a congregation determine those things. And it is feasibility. And sometimes that feasibility comes back and it says timing's not right. A great, for instance, of that would be Faith Lutheran in Branson, Missouri. Went through the Genesis process 4 or 5 times. They started back in the early 2000s of thinking of having a school. They just went through the Genesis study once again this last year, and they will be opening a school in the fall of 2024. So God's timing, right? Yeah, and that's part of that feasibility study. Say, not yet, not yet. You know, it doesn't look good. We don't want to start a Lutheran school unless it will be sustainable, successful, and serve the congregation and the community. And perfect example at Faith Lutheran in Branson. And that whole process, it is an interesting process with Genesis. Joel, you've been on several Genesis study process feasibility studies. You actually opened a Lutheran school and have just recently added middle school to Mary Lutheran High School. Tell us about the process of the Genesis studies, surveys, community engagement, the site visit, and then that final report that you give as well.
Sure, yeah. And my background, I've started 2 schools in the midst of starting a third, so I've been really blessed with the opportunity to actually go through what it's really like. And it's hard, right? I think it's the first thing I share with anybody. If you're going to start a school, elementary school, high school, you name the school, it's going to be a lot of hard work. And, that's why we pray like crazy that the Lord will bless that work. To do a good job on this requires an awful lot of listening. One of the first questions I ask when I get to a group is, what's your vision of a school you would like to start in your community? And we always say this about everything with our schools, everything in the end is local. So what works in California may not work in North Carolina, or what works in Cleveland may not even work in Detroit. I mean,
I think that's an important part of the Genesis process is context, right? Mm-hmm. You have to know the context of your community.
Right. Yeah, and so the first thing I do is I listen. What are you thinking of? Initially, most people kind of know what they know. They know they went to a Lutheran elementary school that had certain features and functions and bells and whistles or whatever. They know what schools look like now in their communities and what they would like theirs to look like. And then my job is to listen to see if there's ways that they could start a school that's a little bit different, but still gets to the bottom line of serving Jesus and telling kids about Jesus and raising Christian leaders. And the reason we really listen for that is because it is expensive to start a school. I mean, what everybody would like to have is, $50 million and a piece of property and just call in the architects and get this thing built. But it doesn't work that way. And so I think probably one of the toughest pieces he's talk about down in Branson is as a consultant to tell somebody that, the key pieces aren't in. And what are those key pieces? First of all, you need a dedicated, faithful, group of people who are ready to do this for the right reasons and have done their homework, and who are willing to take advice and willing to understand that they could get some bad news. That's the number one piece. And that's always the worst thing in a report if you go to an area where I went to a town where there was a very large Catholic high school, and they wanted to start a high school. And it was very difficult in a relatively small town to start another private high school when there already was one in town. And sometimes there aren't enough Lutheran churches to support it. And that's a huge piece. We cannot discount the work of our churches. And I often say, show me a successful school plant, and I'll show you a bunch of pastors who get Lutheran education and are behind that. But, I'll come to visit. A lot of times they'll show me around, get a geographical map in my head of potential spots for a school if they don't already have a spot. After
survey work too, because before the visit we do a lot of survey engagement with constituent groups, so that when you are on that visit, looking at possible locations, seeing the environment, the congregation, you have a lot of those questions already developed in your head because of the survey result.
Yeah, the surveys are huge. Again, listening, right? That's the big thing that we walk away with. And so when we come, we have probing questions that can get to the bottom of what they're trying to do. Again, I think a lot of the places we go to, they have a good idea what they want to do. They get a good idea why they want to do it. They typically, I think one of the strengths I see is a great love for the opportunity. And then after that, then we start saying, okay, what would you like it to look like? Micro school, can you use the online world? We have I work with this school, not even through the Genesis Project, but just through our regular collegial work we do out in Colorado. Mare Lutheran has an online school, and they want to start a high school, add grades 9, 10, 11, 12 to a K-8 school. And for them to be able to do so, they think that the online world can do it. And so then, we've kind of worked with them to show them the opportunity. And then it's kind of in the end, it's local. It ends up in their place. And so when I come back from a visit, I was recently in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where there's about 4 LCMS Lutheran churches in a town that's full of Wisconsin Synod churches and schools. And came back with a lot of great ideas for them. They have a very strong, motivated leadership team. And I usually write those reports as soon as I get home. I barely unpack my suitcase, and I'm already writing because I just want to make sure I get everything down before this old brain starts to forget some of the things. And so they get a report pretty quickly. And then the real blessing too is they get it in their hands. I sent it to the Synod first, so Al and Will Van and the team back in St. Louis gets a good look at it. A lot of eyes look at that report before we actually release it. And the reality is we do all look at things from our own frame of reference. So I was blessed to be part of a team that started a Lutheran High in Seymour, Indiana. Well, Seymour, Indiana is not La Crosse, Wisconsin, and it's not Fremont, Nebraska, and it's not Quincy, Illinois. And so sometimes your prejudices come through in their reports, and another set of eyes sees that, so we can give the most objective piece of information for our people to be able to make wise decisions.
It's really comprehensive, too. I mean, we do a demographic study, and we determine the radius that you may draw from for families. It could be 3, 5, could be 20 miles. In some locations, if it's a rural congregation looking to start a school, you might be coming from 20, 25 miles. Could be feasible, but we examine all of those things, and it's kind of show me, too. Okay, is that realistic? Let's look at traffic flow when we're there. Let's engage a real estate agent and find out about traffic flows, where people work, what the outlook is for businesses that are maybe coming in or closing in the community, and how that might impact things. It is meeting with focus groups, again, of pastors, families that might be prospective parents at the school, students in the school. We look at the tuition of other schools in the community, if there's other private schools there. We take a look at the enrollment of the public school system. We do a real wraparound and then comprehensively get that finished report together to present to that steering committee that's kind of leading the way for that congregation. And then it's really in their hands, and obviously the whole process, what we say is that you got to pray about everything. It has to be God's timing. You've got to utilize his gifts to what you see is the best for the ministry of your congregation or congregations, if it's an association, and then figure out moving forward. Do you want to take the next step and engage then in let's start a school? Let's look about the programs that we have to start, the financing of it, hiring of an administrator, the curriculum instruction, all of those that
State regulation.
Always
my
a big
gosh,
one, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Accreditation.
Yeah.
Some areas think, we can start a school quickly because there's
5 kids in a closet.
yes,
Yeah.
and there's dollars there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, educational savings accounts in some way, vouchers, and the accreditation process. All these things that we think of that. Okay, how will this fit in? And really, what is the true feasibility? Again, not just starting. Because we want to see that school be in the community for sustainability and long-term ministry. So a lot of things go into that.
I say one of the fun things is you mentioned the state laws and regulations, right? You go to a state that has school choice, and for that, what does that mean? And really, parent choice. Al has said that earlier. Right, right. And how easy does this work? And how much are you beholden to Caesar if they're going to help this to happen? I think the beauty of our synod has always been local control. And, sometimes they'll say, well, will the synod, do this, do that? I'll say, you know what? You have to decide what you want to do. We'll give you our best advice on that particular direction. And certainly there will be some things that we want to do, especially if they're going to be calling workers to lead it. And that is always probably the number one thing is get yourself a strong school leader, which brings us back to the whole integrated nature of what we do in Lutheran schools here is the ministries. We need leaders who can take these schools and start. And when I started the school in Indiana, I was just a dumb old history teacher from Baltimore Lutheran High School, not a lick of administrative experience. And the blessing at that time, we had a Genesis project. This was back in 2000 of all time, and worked back then. But the other blessing, of course, too, is to connect them with resources. And so when we started school in Indiana, I was connected at Concordia of Lutheran High School Fort Wayne with their leadership, who knew a lot more about Lutheran high schools than a history teacher would. And taking their advice and their direction helped us to avoid a lot of pitfalls. And a lot of times the Genesis Project is taking them by the hand because you will step on a landmine. Everybody does. And to be able to know it's not the end of the world, it'll be fine. We'll get through it. I think that's encouragement piece is what people need. And that's right out of Scripture, right? I mean, that's what St. Paul's constantly doing in the early churches was encouraging and directing. And yet those early churches are responsible for themselves, in those particular areas.
I think that's important, though, too, because you hit on the connectedness. And that's something else the consultant brings through that experience is I've seen this elsewhere. I know this person. They may be able to help you as well. So it's constantly connecting to others for ultimate success.
Yeah, and that's the blessing. I mean, there's so many times when I come back from a Genesis visit when there's things I don't know, but I know the people who do know. I'll give them a call and I'll say, what do you think? What's your experience on this? So that they do get a voice of experience when they get their report. It's not just conjecture. Because $500 for conjecture, you might as well go to the racetrack for that. But you want facts and you want things that work, and that's what we're asked to do. And by and large, I think it works pretty well.
Well, one of my favorite school start stories, John Jacob, Bethel Morden. We have the story on LCMS School Ministry and our Facebook page, and they started a high school, had an elementary school. And he kept saying, we can't start a high school. We just don't have the ability to do it. And as he tells the story, much more eloquently than I do, he kept saying no. God kept saying yes. All of a sudden, there was a donor, there was a teacher, there was space in the facility. And ultimately, it is about listening. It's listening through prayer. If God desires a school to go, we can say through the feasibility study, we don't think it'll happen. And if he wants it to happen, it'll happen.
Right.
So we need to be really aware of that. But we do our due diligence. We give you that feasibility study, and we walk alongside of you and connect you to those who know. And really, we do the same thing with Lutheran School Consulting Services. It's very much like the Genesis study, but it's for established schools. So it could be a school looking to add middle school because they're elementary and go through grade 5, and maybe they want to add all the way through grade 8. It could be an elementary school looking to add high school grades. It varies. It could be a school that something occurred in the community. Maybe a business that employed many people relocated and went somewhere else. And now what will the impact be? And how do we position ourselves as a school? All these different reasons. Again, you can engage LCMS School Ministry, fee of $500, and we will do a Lutheran School Consulting Service engagement with you, where consultant comes in, we do a lot of interviews, focus groups, surveys, and we do a study for them as well. You've been on a couple of those, Joel. What did those look like?
On the consulting side? Yeah, again, listening like there's nobody's business, because the report often is, this is what you told me when I was there. And sometimes they don't like to hear what they told me. And they wanted this. And all I'll say is, 3 different groups, they brought this item up, and is something you should pay attention to. And sometimes for them, then it's a hard look in the mirror to do. But the consulting side, there's so many changes right now. And you mentioned earlier, not just, we do SWOT analyses, right, all the time. So because it works, it's a good tool. But we also started doing PEST analyses, which is political, economic, social, and technology. The political, you got states getting school choice. What does that mean if I want to start a school?
With the environment and legal as well.
Yes, you could add all that too. Yeah, that pest could be a long pest if you're. But the technology, which has really benefited our schools in the last decade. Absolutely, there's alternatives that can help because running a school is expensive with salaries and benefits, and uprooting a worker and often taking their family. Everybody gets a little concerned about that when you finally get to that point where you got to call somebody. That's when it gets real, and that's when they really need hand holding. And the one thing I'll say too about this, once we're done with whether it's a consulting gig or whether it's the getting school started, we don't leave you once we hand you the report. So these groups constantly are in contact with me, asking questions. One of the groups, all their reporting, they still are meeting. They're sending me all their minutes, and I call up and say, what do you think? What's going on? So it's not like a one and done. And again, your $500 goes a long way in this process.
I think you hit on something else that's very important. Consultants, whether it be Genesis, LSCS, the other work that we do, we're always called to speak truth in love. We'll speak it in love, but you need to hear the truth about the feasibility of opening a school, the truth about what it's looking like moving forward in a consulting visit, what the challenges are, and action plans to overcome those challenges, or maybe what the possibilities are because you're looking at opening additional grades and what that might look like. But again, an action plan, so let's speak that truth in love because that's what we're called to do for the success of the ministry. And with LSCS, so Tom, as you're looking at LSCS, why would you direct somebody to us and say, you should engage LSCS?
Yeah, I think I think you said it well. It's very similar to the same reasons you would direct somebody to the Genesis program, but at a different stage in their development. Maybe they've had a school for a successful school, maybe for 20 or 35 years, but demographics has changed. Something else, some other challenge that they weren't expecting has come their way, or they just have gotten out of the habit of strategic planning. I can come in and do so much, but I'm sort of local. And sometimes it's very helpful to have someone maybe not so local, maybe seen as a little bit more objective, but also knowledgeable about what makes a Lutheran school Lutheran. What's the old saying? If you're more than 60 miles away, you're an expert, right? But it's true, though. I mean, if Joel Lansgrainer came to one of our schools in Maryland, he would bring expertise with him and a fresh look at it. And that same, it's not just going to be Joel. It's going to be you looking at it. It's going to be Will. It's going to be other staff members. So they really get a package deal. Any of the schools, and they don't have to be struggling. You're right. They can be looking for something new or a growth opportunity. Again, I just like having that resource as a possibility, something I can offer to consider.
I think sometimes people look at LSCS and they think, we look weak if we're asking for help, or you got to get over that Lutheranism of don't want to engage someone else. We're taking this on. We're going to do this on our own. We are here to provide that help, to provide that guidance, and walk with you in the process. And what we're looking for are educational ministries of excellence that are healthy and doing His work, where our educators are thriving, our administrators are thriving, the students are successful in what they're doing, and they're a Lutheran school. I think it comes back to your main point. Why do we have Genesis? Why do we have LSCS? It's that Lutheran identity. It's who we are. And one of the great lines I heard just recently at a conference is, Lutherans don't teach Lutherans. Lutherans teach because we're Lutheran. And it goes back to our history. It goes back to our foundation of who we are. We were We had schools on the boats on the way to the United States. When we settled here, we started schools and congregations. We really teach because it's in our DNA, and God has called us to do that. And, Lutheran schools know education, and they know it well and do it well. And that's recognized throughout the country and throughout the world. What a great blessing our Lutheran schools.
To highlight what you just said, Al, and I heard this the other day about the Catholic schools, and you can translate over to the Lutheran schools. Right? We don't teach kids because they're Lutheran. We teach kids because we're Lutheran. And I think that's a huge differentiation in how we do things. And the time to come in for LCS is to do it when things are strong, when things are good.
If you are struggling, there's no shame in reaching out.
Yeah.
Use that expertise. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are other people who have either been through it or are knowledgeable or can bring another perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great blessing.
Thank you for your work, Tom and Joel, and for all that you do to support our Lutheran schools. And if you are interested in Genesis Process or LSCS, Lutheran School Consulting Services, please go to luthad.org or contact your education executive in your district. They will be happy to guide you in that process as well. Thank you for joining us today as we talked about Genesis study and LSCS. Blessings to you and blessings to all of our Lutheran schools and the work they do.